Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming for today's session. It's the first one for this week, and the main topic should be your review tutorial part 2, namely about how you can declare and manipulate reference type attributes, single value or multi-valued. I only saw 2 questions from the Google Doc. That might be a good sign, like everybody is catching up. But if you really got struggle with what I cover in the review tutorial series, either part 1 or particularly part 2, you should really reach out to me as soon as you can. Otherwise, I think you will have difficulty understanding the subsequent materials. We already started discussing week number 3 lecture. The pre-recorded lecture was released on Monday, and that one's about exception handling. It's not a very substantial topic, but it's really something I consider is a little bit tricky, because you have to understand very well about how things work together, especially you got method calls. So that's something I will rely on you to really do your part and then get back to me if you got any questions so I can do my part. All right. Let me make a few announcements first, and I'll tell you my agenda for today. It's really important to know that your Lab 0 Part 2 submission is going to be due September 24th. And notice that it's 2 p.m. EST, right? It's not 12 midnight. Okay, so I think some of your, only 1 or 2 of your fellow students might got it wrong. So please make sure it's 2 p.m. EST. And the submission deadline will be strict. I set it up on the server so that you will close the submission at 2 p.m. sharp, all right? And about your lecture week number 3, okay, it's a release already on Monday. So you have until next Tuesday, right, or earlier to actually finish studying the lecture at your own pace. It's a 3 hours. It's just a weekly lecture load. It's finished by then, and then post any questions you might have about exceptions. I believe for the majority of you guys, exception will be a new topic that you have to learn. All right. Let me just show to you very quickly in case you don't know where to get started. To get started, you simply just go to 2030 lecture site, and then you will see under week number 3 over here, right? You got so this is the YouTube playlist to start with, and each video is roughly about 20 minutes or so. In very rare cases, it might be about 30, but mostly 20 minutes. So plan your time to watch between maybe 2 to 3 video clips every day. I think that'll be the best way. And then you got the notes, you got the slides, you got the Google Doc link to post your questions. You got some diagram, and very important, you have to play with the source code I made available to you. I tried to put almost everything I spoke about in the lecture in the source code, but there will be some example programs which I intentionally didn't put them into the Eclipse, into the source code. That's something you should really do on your own. If you got any trouble putting source code into the Eclipse, that'll be the time to reach out to me to ask questions. All right. That's about week number 3 lecture, and then I'll let you do your part and then reach out to me later. And something I'll also spend time today, maybe after I handle all your questions related to Google Doc and also any follow-up regarding the tutorial series. I will speak about your lab number 1. Officially, you should start today, Wednesday, September 22nd. Okay, I released that yesterday evening, just for those who might be keen to actually get started. They might have finished their Lab 0 Part 2 already, so they are just waiting for Lab 1 to be released. But anyway, it's released on time. Including today, the official start date for your Lab 1, you got about 9 days to actually complete this Lab 1. It's more like a review exercise from what I think you should really know from the first year about how to create objects from multiple classes, and also when objects from different types actually interact with each other, and also array type attributes and etc. That's something I think that this Lab 1 will actually review quite nicely. I think I quite like the exercise I put up over there, but you definitely need to start early. Don't really just try to work on just the lab, 1 day or 2 days before the deadline. You may not have enough time to get through all the test cases. Okay, now I'll talk more about Lab 1. For those of you who may not be so familiar with the formats, I will start with you today, all right, together. And for your written test, if you look at the semester calendar, okay, let me just remind you very quickly, okay? It's always good to remind you where you are and what's going to happen soon. So if you go to, oh, sorry, it's here, a little bit too far. If you go to the semester calendar, okay, so we are now here, September 22nd, that's where we are. Right, Lab 1 officially start today, and you will get your written test number 1 next Thursday and Friday. You can refer to the exact time on your course syllabus. I'll release the preparation guide and practice question, hopefully by the end of today, Wednesday. If not, definitely early tomorrow, Thursday. I'll make the study guide about the precise coverage and also any tips, any constraint, and also I'll give you practice questions so you can anticipate what's going to happen, kind of the formats. And the written test will be in principle 20 minutes. If that's going to be longer, I'll let you know, about 20 minutes. Okay. Yeah, so if you got any questions related to the lab, please hold them for now. I just want to address some Google Doc questions and any follow-up related to for your tutorial part 2 specifically. All right. Okay. For now, do you have any administrative questions? You can feel free to ask me now. Any questions? Again, for lab 1, I'll definitely take that as the second part for this session. Any questions? Everybody's okay? All right. Okay, so let me start with the Google Doc question. I only saw 2, right? But both of them are nice questions, actually. Let me start with the first one, okay? The first one over here, let's go over the question from your fellow students. In the tutorial video, if you can remember, this is what I put. I put assert true over here, and whatever that's inside the argument should be a Boolean expression. So here I'm using a relational operator, and then you can see on the right-hand side is actually a string literal value. And then on the left-hand side is actually an accessor method gets a serial number that will also return a string value, okay? And if you can just recall, you can go back to the tutorial video, okay? And especially you can go back to test entry 1. So that's the in the test entry class in your part 2, okay? When I actually first developed this test case, I said it is okay that you actually write this equal for this particular setup for the test. However, in general, whenever you compare string values like this, you should really avoid. So this is something you want to avoid whenever you can, okay? Because using equals to compare string values may actually fail in certain circumstances. That's actually not that's actually quite normal, okay? And that's something I would like to address in just a moment, okay? I just want to mention that. And then your fellow students seem to be a little bit confused with another kind of similar topic I was speaking about in the same tutorial. I got another assertion here, also assert true. And then inside the assert true, I got get products equals P. You can see I'm also using equals sign for the for comparing the addresses, for the two reference variables. And they are kind of confused about why in this case I said you should not try to use equal. But in this case, I can just use equal without any caveat, right? That's basically the question, okay? The short answer is, here I'm simply comparing objects versus objects. When I say object, it's like customized objects. It's object of type of some class that you declare by yourself. In this case, we're comparing products versus products. On the other hand, in the case of string is also a reference type, as I mentioned in the tutorial. However, whenever you're comparing string value, most of the cases, I'll say almost 99% of the cases, you really don't mean to actually get equal, which means to compare the references for the string objects. You really meant to compare the contents, right? Let me write it down, and then I'll go over the test case quickly, and then I have some new example to show to you in just a moment, okay? So the principle is, most of the cases, most of the time, when comparing string values, you mean to compare their contents. Compare their contents, in which case you should really use the equals method, not really the addresses. So equals might work in some cases, but it may not work in others. So that's why you want to have a solution that will always work, all right? Let me revisit this test case very quickly, and then I'll give you some new example to illustrate further my points. So if you review this test entry one test method, so we basically created one product object, right? Let me just visualize very quickly, a little bit briefly, a little bit simplified version of what I did in the tutorial video. If you got any doubts, you should also go back to the tutorial video, okay? So we are basically creating this P reference variable. So P will store the address of some product objects over here, right? Products. Okay, specifically, we got a serial number, and also we got this original price, right? I think the serial number is something that I want to focus on. So I will only put serial number over here just for now, okay? For the remaining different 5 attributes, I'm just going to ignore them for now, okay? So the serial number is going to be iPad Pro 12.9, right? I will elaborate this diagram a little bit further, but for now, I just put iPad Pro 12.9. And then you will set other attributes, which I'll ignore for now. And then you're creating another object over here. You got entry E. So E is going to store the address of another a new entry object over here. And remember, every entry actually got 2 attributes, the serial number and also the products, right? So it's entry here. Okay, and then, oh, there's something I think I just said wrong. For products, you don't have serial number. It's something called model, okay? Maybe you have just been wondering. It should be just model. Serial number is for the entry, okay? So for entry over here, it's going to be serial number, and then the serial number is going to be some string literal value over here, right? Let me visualize that. Let me put a question mark, right? So I want to be a little bit more precise about doing this in just a moment, okay? And then also we got the products, okay? And the products is going, if you recall the definition for the entry constructor, you can refer to the code for that, but as part of it, you would say this dot products is assigned to products, right? It's actually part of the implementation for the constructor, right? You can definitely refer to the code for that. I'm going to let you do that. And this over here is going to be replaced by the context object, which will be E. So that means E.products over here is going to point to wherever the argument products, and in this case, argument P will be replacing the product over here, right? That's the kind of visualization we have been doing. So that means this E.product is going to point to wherever P is pointing to. That's what's going to happen. So let me do that. So that means it is going to just point to this object over here, okay? And then let me handle this one first, just to clarify half of the confusion. When I say E.getProducts equals P, why does this work? Okay, if I say E.products over here, it's really referring to this object over here. Versus if I simply say P is also referring to this very object over here. So they're referring to the same objects. So that's why it should be passing. Okay. Just get this one clear first before I move on to the string literal, okay? So this one, let me remind you very quickly. Are they pointing to the same objects? In this case, indeed, they point to the same object. That's why it will pass. You might be wondering, what's going to happen if I say E.getProducts dot equals P? What if I try to call the equals method on something that's not of type string? You might be wondering. That would be the topic for week number 4 when I speak about the equals method. So for now, for any object types other than string, you can just assume we're going to say equals. As soon as I get to week number 4 lecture, when I talk about the equals method, I'll give you the whole story. It will take some time to actually explain properly. So I don't want to rush it today. All right, for now, equals, that's why it will work. You can simply visualize it and see. And now what I want to do is to clarify about this assertion, the orange one over here, okay? What this one is saying is E.get serial number, E.get serial number is somehow going to return some string value over here, right? I still want to put the question mark just for now, okay? That's the left-hand side. And also, this is simply some string literal value. And it's simply this F9, DN, whatever value over here, right? So now we want to know exactly what this really means, okay? Let me give you some principle over here, and I'll use a brand new example to explain further, okay? The principle is, let me just put down over here. So here is the principle. So this is actually a principle adopted by any programming language compiler, right? Because it's actually for space efficiency reason, okay? So for space efficiency reason, all occurrences of the same string literal will reference the same object at runtime. I'll illustrate that in just a moment. The same objects at runtime. Okay. One is about space efficiency. Basically, we don't really want to create a separate string object for every string literal, even though they have the same value. Okay. So all of them are going to reference the same object at the same time. So let's say for this particular example, right? Let's say for this particular example, let's take a look, like how many times the string literal, this particular serial number occur. In this case, it occur 1, 2, and 3. 3 times. First of all, agree, right? Since this string literal appear 3 times, so when the compiler try to compile your program into some machine code, it has to worry about at the runtime, how do we represent these 3 string literal values in the memory? You got 2 options over here. Option number 1, this will be one separate string objects. This will be another, this will be one separate string objects. This will be string object number 2. This will be string object number 3. So we got 3 different locations in the memory to store these 3 values. That's option number 1. Option number 2, given that these 3 occurrences are really referring to the string, the same string value, simply F9, DN, etc. Why don't we simply create a single string object in the memory and then have its address stored in these 3 different places? So we still have just one, right? You can see I just proposed 2 options for you. And for all the the compiler for all the major programming languages, they will choose for option number 2, meaning that for all the occurrences for the string value, right? We'll talk about all the occurrences for the string value. All 3 occurrences, they will refer to the same string objects, just one. So what's happening exactly is like this. Let me just draw that, and then I'll give you another new example. What's going to happen is, let me draw that here. So we will have one particular string, right? Remember, string is a reference type, but typically I wouldn't really draw string objects unless I really have to. But this is a scenario where I have to clarify carefully. Let's say we got one string object over here. So I'll say string. And there might be some private attribute for the string object called value. And then it's a F9, DN4, right? Etc. Okay. So the way string is actually stored in the memory is by using an array of character. So once you get to 2031, the C and Unix course, I think they will, your instructor will cover a little bit more about the string, like about string value in the C language. Okay, but anyway, in this case, this is going to be a different character. Let me just put a few. F9DN. So that means we got F, a character, 9, a character, D, a character, and etc. So that would be the literal, string literal, okay? And then what's going to happen is you can think about this particular reference, number 1. This second reference, this is the third reference over here. All the 3, they are referring to the same string objects. So 1 is referring to this object over here, and 2 is also referring to this object over here, and 3 is also referring to this object over here, right? So hopefully you can see the pointer here, right? So we got only one single string object over here. So now if you try to take a look, when I say entry E, new entry, and we'll set a serial number. So this serial number is referring to object number 1, right? And then if you refer to the definition for entry, we're going to say this dot serial number is assigned to that serial number. So that means E dot serial number over here is going to point to wherever 1 over here is pointing to. So that means we got another alias over here. So this one will be particularly important to actually see. So serial number over here is also going to point to this string objects. So now a very sensible question is, how many names or how many aliases do we have for this particular string objects? How many? You have to look at the how many incoming errors you have. You got 1, 2, 3, and 4. More precisely, 1, 2, 3, and also E dot serial number over here. We got 4 different ways to refer to the same string. Okay, so far so good. And then when we revisit this particular assertion here, when I say E dot get serial number, E dot get serial number is actually going to refer to this string literal over here. What about the string literal, which is number 2? It's also referring to the same string object. So that's why this will be equal. That's about just string literal. I would say for this course, I think for many scenarios, you might just get around by writing equals, but it's no guarantee it will always work. I can just make this stop to work very easily, like this. Let me just give you one example. What if for this one here, okay, like this, instead of this, I will write the following. You can also give a try in your Eclipse. I think I try another way to make this fail in the tutorial video. I'll just give you another example. Rather than just spelling out a string literal over here, I can simply say new string, anonymous objects. New string, just running out of space, but you can put over here F9, DN, and etc. Okay, just replace this string literal over here by this anonymous object over here. And what will be the consequence? The consequence will be we just have another different memory location of string objects over here, whose value is that particular serial number. It's just separate array of characters over here. And then, so for number 2, it's not going to point to this same object anymore. Instead, it is actually going to, right, since we say new string, so it is actually going to point to this string object over here, which is completely different. So now if you run the equals over here, you're basically comparing E dot get serial number is referring to this, and also this one is actually a new one, so that'll be referring to this. So they are different string objects, so that's why you will fail. All right, so my point is you should not really just rely on a setup that's given to you to make it just work. So using equals for string value is dangerous, I would say, because if at any point the value you're comparing against is actually not a string literal, if there's simply some separate string objects, then equals will definitely fail. In that case, you better just use a dot equals method. All right, so that's kind of a more elaborate explanation from the tutorial. Okay, I have one private message over here. Let's see. Equals method compares content equal compare addresses. That's correct. However, it's a principle, but for other reference type, let's say product class, or maybe for your entry class or refurbished store class, it really depends on what do you mean by contents. It's something that customizable, right? So that's something you'll be covering in week number 4. Why is it that you would, when you need to access a private attributes, you should use a public accessor? Yeah. So Jaeyoung's question is a good question here. The reason that you should really keep all the attributes private is because it's more to do with a software design principle called encapsulation, right? I think let me address this maybe in a maybe extended setting. But the short answer is if you only actually give public access to attributes, the problem is attributes are usually very subject to changes. Okay, let me just give you some quick summary. Okay, I can try to elaborate on this maybe a little bit later. Okay, why attributes should be private. Why not just public? In which case, we can simply get away from the public accessor. That's a valid question, should be private, right? So let's now know the facts. Number one, attributes are mainly for implementation detail. For example, let's say you're using, let me go a little bit, look ahead. So when we say implementation, that means you have choice. Either you want to use a primitive array, or maybe you want to use an array list for your own projects, or maybe you want to use a linked list. These are all viable options for your implementation, and whichever you choose is going to affect the type of your attributes, right? So that's why I meant attributes are mainly for implementation, okay? And then for long-lived, we're not talking about like a short-term projects. For long-lived projects, implementation strategy are subject to changes constantly. Are subject to changes constantly. Right? So the two highlights I want to make is, number one, attributes are mainly for implementation, and implementation are subject to changes constantly. So that means your attributes are subject to constant changes as well. It should be for long-lived application or projects, okay? So the consequence of this, when there is a change on a public attributes. For example, maybe you have one attribute that used to be a primitive array, but you decided that I want to change that into a linked list. And going from primitive array into linked list is actually quite a drastic change, because the supported operation for primitive array is very different from linked list. For example, in Java, you can definitely write an indexing notation for array, but for the linked list, you cannot write it, right? For example, you got to make some proper method call in order to call on the linked list objects. So whenever you make any changes on the attributes, when there's a change on the public attributes, all callers. And for those of you who actually get onto already week number 3 lecture, you will see what I meant by callers. For all the callers for this particular attribute, they used to be aware that this is a primitive array. But suddenly, if you change the attribute type from primitive array into linked list, everything on the caller's code or client's code, they will stop the compile. So that's very inconvenient. Okay, let me write it down. All callers of this attributes will be affected. And it's very annoying because it's compilation error. Okay, and one more conclusion to make. So that's why the conclusion is attributes should be hidden as private. And number 2, let public methods return values of those private attributes. Maybe I can prepare some example for you guys, maybe for next week. How about that? I need a little bit of time, but I think it's a very good question. I like it. You know, that means you're really thinking. You wouldn't just take whatever I told you and take it for granted. And so I would say I'll keep this page over here, and then for next week, I'm going to go over all the points over here by using some concrete example to show to you why attributes should really keep as private. But I think the deep reason is really related to software design principle called encapsulation or information hiding, right? Right. So once we let the public methods return values of those private attributes, whenever you make any changes to the private attributes, it's not going to affect any caller of those public methods because their headers wouldn't change. Right? It's a little very abstract addressing of the question, but I'll give you more concrete example next time. All right. Anyway, good question, guys. Any question until now? Let me see. The practice test will be released maybe either by the end of today or early tomorrow, the latest. I'll give that to you. Okay. I can see one hand raised. Please go ahead.
Hello, Professor. I have similar question as Jen. Like when we use the encapsulation or data hiding for, let's say, inside one class, we have one method,
yeah,
and we don't want to use that method in a main class. So we hide that method. But let's say if we want to test that particular private method inside the JUnit test, how we can access it?
Okay, good question. The question was about how, well, let's say, I think like pretty much like for attributes, we better keep them private. For the methods, I would say there are certain methods which might be only used for maybe helper method purpose, meaning that they're only used for internal purpose. In that case, you will also make them private. So the question was, how can you test a private methods? That's mainly the question. Okay. Let me just write it down. Okay. Some methods are private for internal use only. And whenever you declare either a method or attribute as private, that means any class other than its declaring class just cannot get access to them. You just cannot call them. Okay. So now here's a follow. That's a question following from this. How can a JUnits test method test it? Okay, that's a question. Good. Let me give you several responses over here. Number one, definitely you cannot call that private method directly from the JUnit test method. That's for sure. And I'll tell you how you can work around. Okay, you cannot call upon that private method directly for sure. That's an access control that Java will enforce. The private method directly for sure. Okay. Of course, let me be more precise. From the test method. But number two, the way to work around is you can create some public, how to say, more like a public. You can create some public method, public accessor for that method for testing purpose only. I'll show you to you. I'll sketch the solution. Okay, let's say over here, let me just sketch very quickly. Let's say we got two classes over here. Let's say this is your JUnits class. Okay. Let's say we got, on the other hand, we got another class, maybe in the model package. Okay. Let's say this is your model class. Let's say over here, we got private, maybe void, and some method here. Okay. You got some definition over here. Of course, inside this particular class, you just cannot call this directly because it's private. There's no way you can get around. What we can do is you can try to say, you can put a comments over here to say you have a section here for testing. For the testing of some private method. So you can get around to say public. You can say also void. And then you can just say maybe access n. And then over here inside, you will simply call n. That's what you can do. And then when you are pretty every time when you run all the test cases, you get a green bar. You don't think you're going to do tests for a while. You can simply either try to move this away or simply comment it out whenever you don't need it. Whenever you need it again, you can actually put this back to uncomments. In that case, you can actually make sure when you are not testing it, nobody can actually call this method. This method is only supposed to be called by the JUnit test class, not no one else. Okay, but that's some workaround. So does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, let me just add a little bit more, kind of beyond the just for your knowledge. I think it's a very valid concern you're thinking about in terms of designing maybe how we can get access to private methods for testing purpose. For Java, their language support is simply not rich enough for you to say, I want to have this method here available only for maybe the JUnit test class. That's basically what you're describing. Java doesn't have this capability support for you. There are other languages that might be more towards design. They may have such access control modifier for you. Okay, I just want to for your knowledge. But later on, when you go for your go to your workplace, it really depends on which language you're using, and then you may just need to find out the workaround to go around this scenario. Okay. All right. Good. All right, guys. If no more follow-up question to what I have said so far, I want to show you one quick example about string literal, just for your understanding, and then I'll talk about one more Google Doc question. If no more, and then I'll talk about Lab 1 briefly. Okay. Okay, let me just go to, yeah. I will also make available this source code together with you. But what about we do it more like a practice quiz? You asked me about if there can be any written question, right? This could be one thing I can put on the written test. It's possible, okay? By the way, you might be wondering, can we use Eclipse during the written test? The answer is yes, you can use it. However, I would say sometimes the question I give to you might involve maybe several classes. So in that case, it would be better if you can just by looking at, by understanding what exactly how each class is related to each other and then figure out the answer, rather than trying to put them all down into Eclipse and then try to run the program and see what the answer is. That's not my intention. You can do it, but it's kind of up to you because you will have time constraint for your written test. Okay, so guys, why don't we take this more like an exercise, like a practice test for your written test? Okay, and of course, try not to put it on the Eclipse just yet. I already typed it out. I'll make the source code available to you. Let's now try to see together. Okay, let me go over read the question together with you. Let's say we have one class called foo. We got one private string attributes s. We got a mutator method in f, okay, to fn, and then some string parameter, and we say this.s is assigned to s, right? Very easy. Whatever this.s is going to point to wherever s is pointing to, right? Also, we got one public accessor, get a string value, which will return just s. All right, easy class. Let's now go over this console application line by line. Oh, you know, I think this should be visible to you. Okay. Let's talk about string values, and we got a main method over here, right? Eventually, I will let you maybe type on the chat if you want to participate to see what the output should be, right? We'll go line by line. Let's say we got string S1, S2. There are different string literal over here, simply spelled the same way, York University, the same, okay? And then we got string S3 over here is simply a new string. So a hint to you is creating a new string objects, all right? So now let's start with 1, 2, and 3. Okay. So when you put your answer, I would suggest you actually put 1, 2, 3. 1 should be what? 2 should be what? 3 should be what? Right. So here I'm putting. You don't need to include this part. That's okay. You don't need to. The first part S1 equals S2. Second part S1 equals S3. Third part S2 equals S3. I can see one answer already. Very good. Anyone? 1, 2, and 3. You can think about it before I explain. I'll also verify that together with you on the Eclipse. This will be one possible kind of question I might put on the written test. So give it a try. Don't be afraid to be wrong. It's absolutely fine. I'll wait for maybe one more moment. I'll zip some water, and then you can put your answer on the chat, and then we'll see. Okay, so far I can see the answer. Yeah, very good, guys, very good. So far it's very good. So let's see, the answer should be true, false, and false. Okay, either because you already knew it, or maybe after my explanation in the earlier part to say about a string literal. Let me explain that one more time in case you're still struggling. These two, you can think in this way. 1, 2. Okay, so these are the two string literals, but this one is a little special. Okay, so you can see all these string literals spelled the same way. However, for S3, it's actually for this particular new string. Whenever you see new, it's always the case that it's going to create some separate objects, separate from any existing objects of the same kind. So what's going to happen is for these two over here, since they're spelled the same way, so that means at the runtime we're going to get one string objects over here. Okay, I'll just say S over here. S1, S2, they will be pointing to just this the same string objects. It's going to be York University. I'll just say YU. Okay, York University here. And for this S3 over here, since it's actually a completely new string over here, so it's guaranteed to be just another string object over here, also string, spelled the same way, York University, but it's going to be S3 over here, right? So that's why if you try S1 equals S2, they are pointing to the same objects. It should be true. S1 equals S3. S1 is pointing to this object here. S3 pointing to this, so they are different. And similarly for S2 equals S3. So true, false, false. Very good. And I'm not going to bother you too much, but 4, 5, and 6, you don't need to answer. I can tell you that it's going to be all true. Because now when we say string value and we say dot equals, it's actually guaranteed to compare their spelling or contents. S1, S2, S3, they all refer to the same spelling, even though they might be different objects, but it's going to be all the same. So that's why they're going to be all true. So true, true, and true. 4, 5, and 6. All right. So far, so good. I think as long as you really remember the idea about when you have the same string literals like this, they all refer to the same string objects at the runtime. It's actually very important. All right. One question from Marco: will capitals count in something like dot equals? Yes, it's going to compare contents, and the comparison is case sensitive. Right. So, for example, if one string literal may be capital Y over here, and one hypothetically lower y, in that case, they will be different objects. Right. They are different. Right. So spelling is actually case sensitive. All right. And then let me now try to get your answer. Let me go over again the question together with you. Let's say we are creating some objects over here of type foo. Okay, just objects, obj. And then we just print to the console to say we now try to set a string to some literal value versus we're going to set it to some new string. Okay. So let's say, let me just go over the code you should know. So let's say obj.fn, and then we pass the string literal over here. And then we're going to print out something over here. And we got another string S4 from the new keyword over here. And then we'll pass S4. So the main comparison is passing a string literal versus passing S4. That's actually a new string. That's the main difference. And then we're going to call, once after these two, we're going to call by saying obj.getString value equals York University versus obj.getString equals York University. The same two lines. You can look at the question a little bit more, but I just want to highlight this line over here is the same as this line over here, identical. And this line over here is the same as this line over here. Okay, so let me call that over here 7, 8, 9, and 10. All right. Now you can take a moment to think about what should be the output, true or false. Seven, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, when you got your answer, put on the chat, and then I'll wait for a moment, and then we can go over. Okay, I see 2 answers now in the chat. If you want to also participate, go ahead and wait for just 1 moment, and then we'll start. Okay, the answers I can see in the chat are pretty much consistent, except that I got some, okay, I think I can see the first 3 answers are pretty much consistent, and the last one I'm seeing over here a little bit different. Okay, let's see how to understand this. Okay, so let's now first start with creating this object over here. So obj pointing to an object of type foo. There is only one attribute s over here. Initially, it will just be pointing to null. Right? Remember, string is a reference type, so that's why initially, without setting it up, it will be the default null. Let's now go on to the first one over here. If you say obj.fn, so this is just yet another string literal spelled the same way. So you can think about this string literal is indeed also pointing to this string object over here, right? The same as S1 and S2 over here, just the same. Okay, that's what we're doing. And then when we set obj.fn, obj.fn will simply set this.s is assigned to s. This will be obj, right? Let me just annotate it. So this will be obj, and s over here would just be that York University string literal. Okay, so what's going to happen really is obj.s is going to point to wherever this string is, this pointer is pointing to, right? They'll be pointing to the same string. That's what's going to happen. Let me just annotate it quickly. So rather than pointing to null, it's now going to point to this string value over here. So we got aliases, right? Let's now take a look at the comparison. We say obj.getString. Obj.getString is going to refer to this particular object over here. And here we got yet another York University spelling. And this one you can think about just the same string literal. So it's guaranteed by the compiler, it will reference to the same string literal objects. So let me just get it. So this York University object over here is also guaranteed to point to just the same object over here. So we are now really comparing object.s get string value over here versus the York University over here. So they are pointing to the same object. So that's why it should be true. Okay. And given that they are really referring to the same objects, of course, their content should be the same, just York University, spelled the same way, right? So that should be true and true for the first 2. Okay. All right, so let's now try to take a look at 9 and 10, okay? For 9 and 10, let me use maybe blue, maybe pink. For 9 and 10. So here, okay, we got S4 is going to be a new string over here, right? So that means S4 is now referring to just another string value over here. And then also going to be York University, right? Again, the new keyword is guaranteed. It's going to be a separate object from all the existing ones. If we try obj.fn, that one is going to do the following. It's going to say, we're going to say obj.s is now going to point to wherever this particular S4 is pointing to, right? S4 is pointing to this object over here. So that means we're going to change. Rather than pointing to over here, it's now going to point to this particular string, right? Now, if we try the following. Before I do that, you can see York University, again, is a string literal. So that one is the same spelling, so it's guaranteed this particular string literal is also going to point to this original one. All the string literals spelled the same way will reference the same string objects. That's a principle I keep emphasizing. Now, if I try this, obj.getString is now going to point to this new string that's actually resulted from S4, which uses a new keyword. Compare this with York University, which is referring to this. So they're different. I can see we are basically comparing this versus this. They are different objects. So it's going to be false for number 9. Even though they are different objects, but you can see their spelling, York University, the same spelling. So it should be true. Answer should be true, true, false, true, right? For those of you who didn't really, I hope you've been thinking about it, but that's really how you figure that out, right? If you really need some visualization, I just did it. If you can easily find out the answer, good for you, either way. Any questions related to this string literal value over here? Any follow-up you want to talk about? For number 10 over here, we are using equals method. That means we're comparing the contents for the string value. So we're comparing this York University versus this York University. They spell the same way. So yes, so that's why they are equal, contents-wise. Does that answer your question on the chat for number 10? All right, very good. Very good. Okay, if no follow-up, I can see Charu. So your hand is still up. Do you have any further questions, or you just forgot to lower your hand? Okay, good. The latter. All right. Any more follow-up question to this before I move on to the next one? The next one is going to be very quick. I do have one. Yes, Said.
Yeah, hi. So in terms of like searching the key values, doesn't this like impose kind of a performance burden? So every time you're referring to a like a string, it has to search whether it's you know, like a reference or if it's the actual literal itself. Like if there's a long list of string literals, then doesn't that kind of impose a performance hit?
I think the string literal, it really depends on what your application needs. I would say, yeah, so if you really have some very long string literal, you might be right. Maybe it might be more efficient to store them maybe either in a database or maybe in some other kind of a string builder objects. I think that's kind of like how to tweak the performance. But I think in most of the application, I think that your string literal may not be that long. So I think that might be okay, may not be a concern.
Like even in terms of the number of unique string literals, doesn't it have to kind of traverse through the entire list, finding, okay, well, this is the reference, the references. Okay, yeah.
Yes, correct. Yeah, that's a good question here. So yeah, it's a very good follow-up thoughts, very good. So according to the principle, let me just refer to that. I said, let me see here, principle. All the occurrences of the same string literal will reference the same objects. But now the thing is, compiler will have to perform some complex algorithm to actually parse your source code and then find out exactly how many distinct string literals you actually have in your source code. Maybe your source code got maybe 1,000 Java classes. You got maybe 500 different string literals in there. In that case, the compiler will have to figure out exactly. I can tell you that I don't know the exact details, but I think the compiler will be very smart and clever in terms of tuning the performance. I'll give you some idea. For example, let's say if we got, let's say, York University as one string literal. Okay, let's say you got another one, maybe called New York. You can see this part here got York. This part here also got York. Of course, the naive way would be, since these are two different spellings, we can simply create two different objects that will actually, one represent York University and all its occurrences. The other one will be New York and all its occurrences. That'll be one way to do it. But the compiler, sometimes if the space is really a major concern, maybe for embedded system, for example, in that case, they will be a little bit more clever, something like this. They can say, they can break it down to say, maybe for this particular York, they will try to create one string simply called York. And then one will be university. And the other one will be maybe new over here. So they got these three objects over here, and then they will have a clever way to actually say, whenever I'm referring to this, I'm really referring to the York and university string objects. Somehow they have a way to connect them. And then for New York, you're really referring to the new and also York over here, right? So I'm just saying that there are many things that compiler can actually do, but there's something that's beyond this course. Yeah. So Saeed, is that okay for you?
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks.
Very good. Very good. Very good thoughts, guys. Keep it going. Good. Okay. One question here about a written test. For the written test, are we to expect these types of analysis question provided through eClass, and we have to provide explanation, or are there other types of questions to be expected? Okay, two parts over here. Let's say, for example, if you're given code like this, for example, here, like here and here, I think one way to ask about it would be just multiple choice. I would say here we can see, let's say, what's going to be the output for 1, 2, 3, 4, these 4 lines, and then I'll give you different choices. It can be multiple choice. That's one type. And for your written test throughout the term, I think due to the TA hours I'm actually offered by the departments, I may not have that many explanation type questions for the written test. But in the final exam, you can expect maybe a little bit more like a written response required question, in which case you may have to offer some explanation, in which case some TA or myself have to judge how appropriate it is. Okay, that's kind of the principle. Or are there other types of questions to be expected? I think that there are different multiple choice type of question. It can be a single choice. It could be multiple options that should be chosen, and there might be some like a drop-down menu to choose like a matching type of question. I think once I release the practice question, you'll have more idea. Just wait for that. Yeah. Again, either by the end of today or tomorrow early. Either way. All right. Okay. Any follow-up to this? Okay. Very good. Okay, another thing to remind you guys quickly. So I'm going to make this source code available to you today. So you will see under today's session, it will be 2021, September 22nd. And then under the console apps, I got the full and string values, the one I just explained to you over here. So for those of you who might be still wondering about how it will work on the tool, well, maybe if you want to look at the debugger to see the memory addresses, you can feel free. If you got trouble doing that, you can come back to me. Anyway, I'll make the source code available to you for those of you who might need it. Okay, one more question from the Google Doc. Okay. Okay, I can see some question about Lab 1. Bear with me. Once I finish this question here and any other follow-up, I'll talk about Lab 1. Okay. Okay, so here, let's go over this question here. It's more about the programming pattern, right? Your fellow students don't seem to understand why the entries need to be this.noe -1. Okay, is it because NOE doesn't use 0 as the first element index? That's not right. The NOE, I'll read through the question and then I will illustrate it very quickly. NOE doesn't use 0 as the first element index. First of all, this is wrong. Okay, and also if NOE is actually 4, the indices for the most recent entry should be 3. That's correct. Considering 0, 1, 2, 3 as the index entries. Okay, this part is actually right. Let me try to clarify both at the same time. Okay, so the programming pattern that we talk about, let's say we got entries array, right? It's actually going to point to certain fixed size. Okay, so maybe 0, maybe 1. And then 2 and 3, and then etc. The last one should be the maximum capacity -1, right? The maximum capacity -1, okay? Because we, well, that's something I'm hoping that you can recall from the first year. Array indices always start with 0. That's why the size of the array should be, the maximum index should be the size -1, right? And then, so when we talk about NOE, You can think about NOE is more like a pointer, right? Think about NOE in this way. So NOE in the beginning is likely pointing to here. In the beginning, simply just 0. So they're actually, that's why it's actually for two purposes. So number one, NOE indicates the number of entries objects stored. Number two, where the next entry object should be stored. Should be stored. And one way to understand this is to draw like a pointer over here. You can think about in the very beginning, NOE is actually initialized to be 0. That means the next entry to store will be at index 0. That's the first one, right? Let's say we do that. If I actually got some, this is pointing to some entry objects over here. As soon as I do that, you can think about we are moving this pointer over here to the right by 1 position. Effectively, programmatically, we are changing that from 0 to 1. So now we are still being consistent with the two purposes. Number one, NOE being equal to 1 tells me that we got only one entry that's stored. And number two, when we try to store the next entry, they should go to index 1. Let me just do one more, and then we are done. Okay. So now let's say I want to store the second entry. You should go to index 1 because NOE is equal to 1. Once I put this entry over here, I'm just going to move the NOE pointer over here to the right further. So I'll move it here. And of course, programmatically, that means I'm going to increment its value by 1. So that'll be 2, right? So this will keep going. I think hopefully that will clarify your fellow students' concern. Okay. Any follow-up question too about this programming pattern over here? Of course, I explained in very much detail in the part 2 of your review tutorial. If you got any other questions, you can ask me now or office hour today if you wish. Any questions? Yeah, I'll open the floor for any other follow-up question to tutorial part 2 or any other OOP questions before I move on to lab 1, which is also crucial. Anyone? Don't be shy. Anyone?
Yeah, what kind of algorithm is used to kind of go through the list of string references to find?
Oh, you mean to actually find out the distinct ones, right? I think I think one way to do it. Well, you talk about realistic application, right? Well, once you get to, for example, the follow-up course to this one will be 2011, where we talk about data structures. One very efficient data structure would be, let's say, a binary search tree, balanced one. So, very quickly, okay. So basically, you have I try to be very precise. It should be balanced binary search tree. Okay. You basically try to put all the string literal values you see in the program. Every time you see, you will see a new string value from, let's say you got a tree already like this. And then every time you want to add a new string literal, you want to add to it, you have to search for where in the tree you want to insert that particular value, and also at the same time maintain the balance. Okay, let's say you do that, and for that one there, if you can maintain the balance of the binary search tree, you will take about log n, where n is the number of number of literals in your program. So this will be a very efficient algorithm you can do, binary search tree. But don't worry too much about it since you haven't learned about it. I don't think we're going to cover a binary search tree. That will be in 2011. I think I guess many of you might take that course maybe in the winter. That's something you can keep in mind. Binary search tree, balanced one would be one way to go, or you can build a hash table for that. If you build a hash table, given that your hash function, it's really can really minimize collision in the hash table. Collision means you actually got the same key value for the string literal anyway. So that's something to be addressed also in 2011. If you can build a hash table, sometimes the performance for searching for any unique or duplicated string values, it can be almost like an n, like a linear time. That can also be done in certain scenarios. So these are the two viable options. Yes. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, I was thinking more like the compiler, what kind of algorithm it uses to
Oh,
traverse
the compiler.
through.
Okay. If you talk more about compiler, yeah, I can also address that a little bit quickly. That's also my interest. If you talk about how you can compile your program, I'm not sure how many of you are taking the course 2001 this term. It's the introduction to the theory of computation. And for those of you who might be taking it, I think very soon you'll reach the topic called context-free grammar. Okay. So first of all, you learn about regular expression, about like a linear scan of your input stream. And then later on, once you get to context-free grammar, is a different class of languages. For the context-free grammar, that's how you can build a parse tree, like a tree that is structured for your program. And then the compiler essentially is more like an algorithm performing on the tree. That's the compiler, very brief. But if you are really interested in building a compiler yourself or to design your own programming language and build a compiler, 4302 will be some course you can consider at some point. Does that answer your question maybe somehow?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you know what? Just for your interest, right? Just take everybody another 5 seconds. If you're really interested in compiler, I can refer to you to, I actually taught the compiler course back in the winter 2020. If you go to 4302, okay, you don't need to go over the lecture, but at least if you're interested, go to, there is a tutorial video I made about how you can build compiler from scratch using Java. Okay, but I think at this point, it may still be a little bit difficult for you because you haven't learned about the idea about a tree and also some design pattern. But if you're interested, you can try to follow along the tutorial and then get some feel. But it's definitely some nice course that you should really try to take before you graduate. It's a very good technique to have about how to build language compiler. Okay. When can we get Lab 0 Part 1 marks back? I think I need to set up the TA and also to get together with the get a grading script run. I think bear with us for maybe another week to 10 days. Yeah, I'll try to get it done. Yeah, no problem. All right, guys, are we ready for Lab 1 a little bit? Okay. I will see how everybody is feeling about Lab 1, but as I said, if you can really try to get started with your Lab 1 from today, I will help you with getting started. At least you know how to start. And then you got about 9 days to complete it before, not the coming Friday, but next Friday, October 1st, to really finish the lab. I think it's quite important. It will be also very good preparation exercise for your upcoming programming test 1. Okay, it's also coming before the reading week. Okay, let me talk about Lab 1. If you got any question, please interrupt me by turning on your mic or just on the chat, either way. Let me help you get started. Okay, first of all, go to your e-class, and then you will see under laboratory assignments over here. Over here. And then you'll see Lab 1 instructions and also Lab 1 starter projects, right? Let me just open this instruction over here. Okay, I'll go over with you some points. I think the detailed problem description you really have to read it. I cannot read it for you. Okay, but I'll go back here in just a moment. Let me just show you the project over here, how you're supposed to get started with it. Click on that. This is the starter project you're supposed to import into Eclipse. I got the precise instructions on the lab, but I'm going to do it in front of you just to save you some time. Save the file, for example, to the desktop, let's say. If I save it there, okay, I think it's saved. Okay, you can see it's now on my desktop. Okay, I'm now going to launch my, let me go back to my Eclipse. Okay, let me just close this tab over here. Let me import the project into my current workspace. In your case, it might be different workspace. That's okay. I'll go to File, New. Oh, sorry, File, Import. Okay, and then under General, Existing projects into workspace. Next, select Archive file. Okay, so this is also something you want to get very familiar. That's going to be the same procedure when you get the question for your programming test. Okay. Browse, and let me browse to my desktop, and then I'll choose 2030 for 21 Lab 1. Open. and then you will see some project over here, okay? And then you can say finish. So this is the one you got, right? And then you can see there's a red cross over there, meaning that there are compilation errors. It is expected, okay? And then if I open that, you can see under the source package, the source folder here, we got console apps. I wouldn't imagine you would need to add any classes to there, okay? It's really optional. If you really want to try some system and other print line into the console, you can feel free. That's okay. And then you got JUnit tests. That's something I'll go over a little bit with you in a moment. Also, you got model package is empty, okay? So here's the principle. You are only supposed to add classes into the model package. Only those classes you will be adding to the model package, they will be graded. Anything outside the model package, they will not be graded. That's the principle, okay? And then for the JUnit tests, if you open that over here, you can see currently we actually I forgot to delete it, but that's okay. That's for your benefits. Eventually, these are the 4 classes you are supposed to import from the model package. So it's a very good indication that you should really create a class called account, a class called app, one called app store, and one called log, right? Eventually, right? But in the programming test or in the subsequent lab, you may not have these import statement written there for you. Anyway, so for the first one, I think it might be okay just help you get started. All right. So these are the 4 classes you want to build gradually into the model package. Eventually, when you submit, you have to export this project over here as the zip file, like what you did for your lab 0, part 1, and part 2, and then use a web submit, right? That part is the same. You will see lots of compilation error over here, right? You can see lots of them. If you go over problems, okay, I would say don't worry about being 100. You just have to go over one by one. That might be the best way. I would suggest you do the following, okay? You can try to run the test cases right away, okay? If I right-click on that, and I would say run as JUnit test. I know I got some compilation error, but as long as before the submission deadline, you fix all the compilation errors, and then you get a green bar. That's your goal. And then I'll simply say proceed. Right? In total, you got 13 starter tests given to you. I think that the 13 test cases cover a reasonable range of the expectation for your lab number 1. But you will be expected to also write some additional test cases. The additional test cases you write will not be graded. However, they will help you to identify any further issues or bugs in your program. And we got 13. Okay, so I would suggest you do the following. Okay, that'll be a more manageable. Go back to the test cases over here, and let me maximize it. Okay, so there are certain programming requirements, so please make sure you read them. I put them here also for a reason. For those of you who might be used to bypassing instruction, you shouldn't, right? You should really read the instruction carefully, right? I'll let you read them. You can always get back to me if you got any question or doubts about the instructions. Okay, I'll let you read them. And then initially, I would suggest the following. You may just want to comment out all the test cases, starting from number 2 all the way to number the last one, right? So choose them over here, and then Command or Control / you put all of them into comments, okay, just for now. Of course, you will just comment them back one by one. Okay, let me just go back. Okay, so this will be the one you want to focus on right now. I try to arrange the test method in a way that's kind of logical, some logical progression of your development. So you definitely can start with the, you can go with the order of how I gave you the test cases. I do see a raised hand, but just bear with me for a few more minutes. I'll get to you. So let's say you start with this one here, and now what should you do? Assuming that you already went over this particular document, that's why I emphasized before that you should really go over them. If you haven't, now would be the time to definitely do it. Otherwise, you have trouble. You have some struggle finishing lab 1. So let me show to you. 2030, and then you will see under week 1 and week 2, the written notes. Again, this one is about the, this one is the one, but I want to show the other one quickly. Declaring, manipulating reference type multi-value attributes. So that one complements what you learned in part 2 of the review tutorial about how you can manipulate array type attributes. That's important, okay? The other one, which will be directly relevant to your not just labs, but also programming tests. There will be very similar format. So if you click on this document here, inferring classes methods from JUnit tests, right? It's a very brief document, but very self-contained. Okay, if you go there, you will see, for example, if I have person Jim is assigned to new person over here, I can see from this single line here a few things. Number one, there exists a class called person. If it doesn't exist in my projects, I should create it, a person class, number one. Number two, for the person class, there should be an overloaded methods that will take two input values. Which are the two? One will be for some, what is this floating point number or integer number, right? You got to judge. In this case, of course, floating point. It will be a constructor of person that will take two, maybe double numbers over here. And one will be, you got to also read over the comments around the test cases. They will indicate to you what each argument is meant for. From the context of this, we will know that this is actually for the weights and this is for the height, and etc. And then if you got Jim.gain weights by, so this is like a standalone method, as we explained in the slides for the review slides on classes and objects. If you got a standalone method call, that means this should be a mutator method returning void, and which will take an argument of type double. Similarly, here you can see we are using the method called return value as the right-hand side to some variable assignments. So that means Jim.getBMI should be an accessor method, number one. Number two, the accessor method should not take any arguments over here, empty. Number three, where should we define this getBMI method? You can see the type of the context objects. Jim was declared as a person objects, so this method should be declared in that particular context object type, right? So this is kind of the scenario, the principle you have to read over in the documents over here. I also got, at the end, some brief exercises over there. So one is about the starter, pretty much like your lab one, but a much more simplified version. And then I also got a solution over there. You can take a look both and compare them. So that would be about what you should do in a simplified way. Okay, I can see some question over here. Does Eclipse have any limitations on M1 Max? I don't think so. I believe they can work well with the newest model, I believe. Okay. What do I mean by we are not allowed to use classes like a string? I didn't say anything about you cannot use string classes. Let's clarify that. Okay, you got to read the instruction carefully. Let me take a look. Here. It is strictly forbidden for you to use any library classes. However, I said at the end. So here are some exceptions where you're allowed to use. You can use the equals method or the format method from the string class. That's okay. All right. And then other methods like, no, guys, no apology are needed. I'm just trying to clarify. No problem. Okay. And also you got substring. For example, substring, you cannot use it. And also copy off. And also array copy, right? So these are all the things I'd rather you build from scratch. I think it's really more beneficial for your learning at this level. Once you get to a higher level, maybe to the third year, I'm not going to bother you with that. But I think for this level, it's good to build everything from scratch to learn from the fundamental. Okay. Okay, so that's about the Eclipse over here. So what I would suggest you actually do try to fix the test case one by one. I can even give out some hints for you quickly. Okay, I don't mind. This one tells you you should really create a log class, and then the log class should have an overloaded constructor, and the constructor should take some string value, right? And then after you fix this, you will see some new compilation error occurring. In that case, most likely it will be about this get version, right? Where should this get version go? You should really look up the type for the context objects and then figure out from there, right? That's kind of what you want to do. So I can give you some rough estimate about how you should progress with the lab. There are 13 test cases, about 13 test cases in total you have to at least pass before you submit a lab. So I think that the final 5 or 6 test cases are harder than the beginning ones. So I would say you want to finish at least 2 to 3 test cases per day, at least. So if you really get struggle with some test cases, you might be, in that case, either you can draw by the TA schedule lab session, you can drop by my office hour, or you can post some general question about the forum, which I'll speak about as well. You got to be cautious when you post question on the forum. Okay, that's about Eclipse. Okay, and sorry, long overdue. So I can see the raised hand over here. Please go ahead. Question.
Hello, Professor.
Hi.
So I did download this file.
Yeah.
And I tried to import this file in the Eclipse, but after that I'm getting error on a package side, and it is showing me that configure the build path. So I don't know what to do with that.
You're saying that you're seeing something other than compilation error. Is it something about packages or?
Yes. So besides package, I'm getting error, and it is saying that configure build path.
Okay. You know what? Can you please drop by my office hour at 3 p.m.? Let's take a look together. I'm guessing it could be that my runtime system here is actually 16. It may be that 16 may not be the version for everybody. I may need to adjust that to be number 8. Can you please drop by my office hour? Let's take a look to double check. If that's the case, I will update the starter file for everybody in the class. Okay, 3 p.m. Okay,
thank you.
Good, very good, thank you. Okay, awesome. But if you don't have any trouble importing the starter code, you can definitely get started. If you got something other than the compilation error, most likely it's because of the version. I can adjust that very quickly after I confirm with your fellow student, office hour. Okay. All right, guys, let me highlight maybe a few points in the lab just to make sure you don't really get yourself into trouble, right? I want to protect you. Okay, right, let's see. For the requirements, please make sure for anything you want to implement for the idea about collection or also list. I can tell you that in the problem section for the instruction 2.3, I'm going to let you read it. Whenever I talk about a list of or a collection of, that's really a strong indication that you should really use a primitive array. But never ever try to use anything that will save you some time by using library classes. Right? As I said, at this point, my judgment call is I think you should really try to build everything using primitive array, loops, and if conditional from scratch. That will be the most beneficial for your learning. Okay, but if you don't like it, bear with me. Beyond this course, you can do whatever you like. Okay, but for this course, please obey the policy. And then you want to make sure the zip file you spelled, it should be the same, right? Again, let me just show to you. When you actually export this zip file, one common mistake, not that many, but when I was teaching 1022 in the winter, a good number of students, somehow they export it to be a different name, right? It should be exactly 2030 underscore 421 underscore lab 1. Check the instruction for the precise spelling, number 1. Number 2, make sure you don't submit the starter code for grading. You want to submit the one you completed your work for grading. That's the 2 things I want to remind you, okay? Okay, and you can read other things. I'll leave them to you, but for sure, you don't want to put any system that out the print line in the classes in the model, right? Remember, we talked about separation of concern in week number 1. And you're welcome to ask questions related to this lab on the forum. You're more than welcome. However, you got to be cautious, right? You can definitely ask questions about how the maybe there are certain lines in the JUnit test I gave to you. Well, there are certain maybe lines in the instruction that's not clear to you. You want me to clarify. That's okay. You can also respond to your fellow student about help them clarify. If your clarification may not be good enough, I will also help you as well. I'll try to moderate. What you should not do is you should not share the code you have developed to ask or to answer question. Don't share any of your code for lab 1. And also don't give out any explicit hints about how things should be done to your fellow student. Any hints about the solution will be left to only me. All right, I will judge to see what hints I should really give. If I really think everybody should know some particular background material, I might even host some maybe even record some extra tutorial video for everybody. Right, that's what I might do. Okay, but please be cautious. Okay, so you should really complete the background materials. I'm pretty sure most of you have done. Okay, the tutorial review tutorial and also the written notes I just mentioned about them. You want to at least go over the JUnit test cases. Okay, and also, you're also getting ready for your programming test 1. And I'll give you more guidance later. It's happening about more than 2 weeks, so we still have time to actually, let's worry about your written test 1 first, okay? And that's about how you can import your projects. You got precise instruction over here. And also we got, so the idea is you got empty console, empty model. Eventually you want to put all the classes into model, okay? And this hint is also very important. Whenever you see any failing test cases, like what I showed to you in part 2 of your review tutorial series, you should really put a breakpoint in the failing line and try to use the debugger to show, to find out the error. Right? Given the example I illustrated in the part 2, you should be able to do something independent on your own. If you got trouble running this, reach out to me. Okay, so that's the actual problem. I'll let you read it. If you got if you need any clarification, reach out to me. Okay. And some hints and requirements. Okay, you can read them as well. And also how to export a project. Follow the step carefully. You also need that those import and export steps for your programming tests. And for you, when you submit, okay, so you want to make sure under the problem sections over here, there are no errors. You don't want to submit to something to me that's actually got compilation error, right? And make sure eventually all the test cases should be uncommented, right? Just make sure. But when you're developing it, that's okay. And then submission instructions similar to before, you also just submit your web submit. And make sure you use you use your EECS logging, all right? So okay, how are you? So are you still having some question, or you just forgot to lower your hand? I guess a letter. Okay. So here, one question here, since we have to create relevant classes in the model package only, is there any purpose to the console apps? Okay, for console application, I actually explained that briefly over here. I would say in the console application package is empty. You may also add a new console application classes to test the implementation methods if you wish. However, they will not be graded. It's only for your purpose, right? If you want it, you can feel free. Otherwise, you don't need to bother. Okay, guys, I need to run to another meeting about 1 p.m. I can be late for 1 minute for that. So do you have any urgent question for me about Lab 1? I can clarify right away. But I think I should really start doing that as soon as you can. And then if you got any trouble, reach out to me, office hour, post on the forum, or you can simply just drop by the TA hours, either way. Any question I can answer right now. All right, seeing none, off you go. Good luck with the Lab 1 and other study materials. And then if you got any trouble, don't hesitate to reach out to me. All right. Okay, you guys, take care. Bye-bye.